And welcome to Badass Women in Business podcast with Cristy and Aggie. To get today, sorry, one more time. Today, we have a fabulous guest. We always have fabulous guests, but today is one of my ultimate favorites because I cannot tell you how much we laugh during our sessions, and it's a breath of fresh air every single time. So, Valerie Chan, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you, Aggie and Cristy, for having me here. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate
So,
having you on.
yeah. So I work with Aggie on a professional basis. She actually helps consult with our company, and it's just been a pleasure having her help platform kind of turn around over the last year. I run a public relations business called Platform. We actually work with clients in the highly regulated industries, right? We work with clients in the highly regulated industries. Hopefully this is taped and edited. And it's just been I think over the last year, we have just been fortunate to have a lot of our clients come to us and asking us to do more work. And I think 2023 and 2024 has been kind of a pivotal moment for a platform, in which case Aggie was instrumental in helping us through the process and putting together growth strategies for the business. Yeah.
Val, what do you think? So I'm gonna go right in because it's a
Sure.
question and it's a fact that you and I have often talked about, but it seems that right now the marketing space, and I'm using marketing very loosely because
Hmm.
PR is a function of marketing, so is digital media and advertising and the more traditional marketing. The that entire faction of business seems to have gone through somewhat of a economic, I'm not going to say downturn, but it seems like it's in a crisis. What's your take on that?
It's a really good question. So I will have to say, like during COVID, while some companies and just companies in general took a downturn, our company increased dramatically. And I know a lot of my colleagues and peers, because I'm on the Forbes Council as well, they actually grew tremendously during that time, taking on a wide variety of clients where you wouldn't know like what was up or down, because companies in the B2B space figured out, oh gosh, I can't do face to face networking. We've got to figure out different ways of getting out there and meeting with our clients. And so they hired marketing firms that, actually provided some great go to market strategies. They hired PR firms like ours to get them on podcasts, get them traditional like media spots on television as well and via social. And over the last, I think over the last couple years, really, like the market has course corrected just in general to where it was prior to the pandemic. And because companies grew so much, obviously there's a natural, lull in how client companies would look at their marketing budgets, look at like where the impact was, and then try to figure out, okay, what are the best strategies to be visible? What are the best strategies to go to market? Is my dollar actually getting the best return? And then what I've noticed, I know 2023 was a weird year because I think we weren't sure whether or not we were going into a recession or a downturn or whatnot. And I think, irrespective of what happened to us, right? In February or March, a lot of companies just halted because they were trying to figure out what actually to do. And so then I would say summer summer and fall took hold, and we're like, okay, well, we need to go forward and do this. And then across the board, this is our clients as well as the agencies that I talk to. They found that their clients were reallocating dollars in ways that they hadn't done before. So that's either doubling down on PR, doubling down on accounts-based strategies to increase increase client penetration or business development efforts, or one client that I know doubled down on technology and Gen AI technology in particular to do a combination of like content and demand gen programs, and actually worked and hired technologists to come on board to work with the technology and configure it so that it could run efficiently. And so they cut their dollars to marketing. They ironically they increased our budget, so it was kind of one of those weird situations. But this particular client is one of the ones that like grew dramatically over the last year. So it was like, I think it was just, like, what exactly do you do? And that is, that's the client's problem and solution. Like, let's double down and figure out what worked best and attribute dollars to that. And so, yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
So, Valerie, with your background, I think you mentioned that you were a lawyer or attorney.
I was a former practicing attorney. That's correct. I was in litigation.
Yeah. What made you, it sounds like you went in PR, then went into litigation, and then came back to PR. Yep. Tell me a little bit more about that journey and why you made those decisions.
Really good question. So I think I was telling Aggie this in a previous conversation. So I, like many people, say, oh my gosh, I really want to go to law school. But you really don't want to go to law school. You think you do because of Law and Order, right? So I actually...
Ally McBeal for me.
Exactly. Mine's Law and Order from way back then. I was just really excited about that. I still watch it to this day, by the way.
Same.
So what happened was I did PR, and I wasn't actually going to go to law school, even though I had an inkling about it. And then during college, I got selected for a 7-week case during jury duty. And it was, I'm from the Bay Area, and worker from the airport got ran over by a Barber Green, which is one of those pavers that you see at the airport paving runways. And the family was suing both the San Francisco airport and another defendant, to actually pay for expenses and that sort of a thing. So I got to see a case, firsthand, and I would say that was one of the most defining moments during my college career. And I'm like, okay, well, if they can do it, I probably can do this. And so that like planted the seed. Before I was like, oh, it would be nice to go to law school, right? And then after that trial, I was like, okay, I really do want to go to law school. So I worked at Oracle during my summers, got a job there, went to PR because I thought, hey, let's do something with my communication skills, really liked that. But then I went to law school at night, and just had a ball in law school. And during during the transition, because I sold the law firm, I sold the PR firm when I was transitioning out of PR into law, and had a stint at the deputy prosecutor's office up in Washington, the sexual assault unit, and did a couple of cases there. And then worked at Sendent because I thought, okay, this would be great. Let's see what it's like working overseas. And got my taste of, okay, let's go into the prosecutor's office, let's do in-house, and then came back to Seattle and actually practiced litigation. And what it actually told me was I wasn't going to do this long term. That was my whole stint. I'm like, oh, this is a great experience, and it's mostly administrative work. And I love giving a story to the judge and prepping clients and doing meet and confer clients, et cetera, et cetera. And then I did two back-to-back cases. And I think I started January 4th. I tell the story on how I get out all the time. January 4th, and I looked up, it was July 21st, and I'd spent 6-7 months married to a computer, married to the office, and just loved ski season, couldn't go skiing, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just got disillusioned. I had one really interesting client interaction where after we had won a case, the client wanted to sue another, potential, defendant. And I was like, dude, I'm out. I'm looking back. I'm not looking forward. And decided to focus on mental health. And then because we had had such a successful business before, clients started coming to us, and then we started getting clients in the e-discovery realm, legal technology, reg tech space, security, like everything related to data coming back. And I'm like, okay, and took one client on, and it turned out to be multiple clients, and then organically grew to where we're at now. Yeah.
Amazing. So several times now you've talked about that regulated space that you're in. Like, what exactly are the businesses that you serve at Platform? Because I think that many of our listeners may not quite understand what a regulated business is.
Sure. So we have clients in the fintech space, the legal tech space, so like managed services providers, law firms, companies like LexisNexis, InsurTech, very exciting. But to me, it's exciting because there's a lot of like rules around the companies that we represent. So I'll give you an example of when I say why it's exciting for a highly regulated industry. One of the companies that we work with had to create patent-related materials for publication placement, as well as experts to put on broadcast and television, etc. And we would come up with a messaging around some of the laws that were just recently placed, and how companies need to comply with these laws, and what practitioners can actually do with these laws now, and how it will impact them. So we come up with, as a marketing agency, PR agency, we come up with the language around that. We prep the attorneys who are going to talk about some of the patent laws that are changing, in addition to creating the content around it. So, yeah. Another one of our clients, is actually playing a huge role in the EU AI Act and the proposed legislation around AI. And so we work with that client to not just get them featured in broadcast, and as well as in media like an Axios or whatever. We also work with them to write the content around it and help shape some of the tools and the tips and the guidelines that they recommend to their clients. So that's what I mean by highly regulated industries, because I'm a tad bit of a geek, as we're kind of talking about it.
Just a tad.
You should kind of see where I'm just like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. my team, so I have a team of 10, and they laugh all the time because they're like, wow, this is really not as interesting as you think it is, Valerie. I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
You're like, but it is to me, and that's what matters.
Exactly. Exactly.
Being that you are in regulated industries,
Mm-hmm.
I would probably find if it was me that storytelling is a lot easier when it comes to a brand versus a
Mm-hmm.
company that is highly regulated.
Right.
So that's going to be one of my questions is how do you weave in and how do you utilize storytelling in these organizations that are highly regulated? And another thing that I thought was really interesting that people
Mm-hmm.
probably don't tie an outcome of working with a PR firm is you have had many clients that have actually been acquired based upon the
Mm-hmm.
work that you've done as well. So
Right.
how does your
Mm-hmm.
storytelling lead to potential acquisition with a lot of the clients you work with?
Chrissy, that's a great question. So storytelling is important across multiple mediums, right? And it's important that you get your messaging right and the story of not just how you were founded, who you are, and what your unique selling proposition is, your USP, which I talk about a lot. It's also important to come up with the stories that support the overarching story. So a lot of the clients that we work with, and this is particularly important with highly regulated companies and highly regulated industries, because it's easy to take a tangential approach and say, okay, I'm going to talk about this regulation or this issue or this service or whatnot, right? It's just easy to fall off a cliff, especially if you get known for one particular thing. But you know, branding and messaging and understanding what that overarching story is more important for these companies because you have to remind the company to tie it back to what their overarching story is. So, we've been fortunate, and I think this comes back from, and I teach these workshops at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center in San Francisco, but the art of storytelling is super important and ultimately like going to actually help sell a company for for the dollars that they want to get. If you can't tell the story, then your valuation, you'll still get sold, maybe, right? If you have a viable product, but the valuation becomes less. And so, one of the things that we work with our companies is, okay, and it's answering this question. Okay, who do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? What do you want the market, what do you want the market to see you as, right? What type of services do you want to sell? I don't, some of it could be products, some of it could be services. Um, it's really the art of, like, I know all consultants that counsel their clients, but by understanding who they want to be in 5 years and 3 years, we could then craft a story arc and fit in a go-to-market strategy as well as services as well as stories that we want to tell throughout the years so that they can get the valuation that they're looking for. There's this one client that we're working with right now. They're amazing. They double down on customer service. I'm not going to name the company for privacy's sake, but we focused primarily on client service and put together stories around client service as well as their USP of what they offer besides client service to their clients. And the process and the workflow that they have as a managed services provider, providing pretty sophisticated services to their clients, we double down on what that actually looks like, the types of projects that they have, in addition to talking realistically to the market on what client service looks like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then made sure that it was consistent across their brand as well as their projects that they're working on. And ultimately, when we started working with them, they were sub 9. And now they're over a 30-something million dollar company, right? Another company that we worked with, we focused on several different stories around data, and they wanted to be known as the data brokers, right? And we worked with them at the start so they were a carve out of another company. And then we worked with them for a little bit. We're on pause. And then we re-engaged with the idea that they were going to get acquired and put together a storyline and a throughput around what is working with and managing data actually look like, creating all these sub stories on what the company could do, what the technology does, and what it actually means to the market. And then they were acquired earlier this year. So, some of the clients we work with are bootstrapped. Some of the clients that we work with are, VC backed. Some of the clients that we work with are PE backed. We've just been really fortunate just because of the storytelling that we do that our clients have had amazing exits. So
Storytelling to increase enterprise value.
love it.
That would be a good title for an article. I'm just saying.
I gotta write that down. I gotta write that down.
No, it's recorded. You don't have to write it down. But seriously, it's massive because the application is perpetual, not just for companies that are trying to increase their value over time, but also I would imagine in the context of a merger or an acquisition and recalibrating the story of the new entity on the back end and how that also shifts and has ripple effects on the staff, the stakeholders, and all of the ecosystem around that organization.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that. So we work with a lot of companies that go through M&A, and what people think about at the front end is, okay, we got a purchase price, we're getting acquired. What they don't think on the back end is that typically a company, it's not a 100% cash buyout, right? It is an earn out. And there are certain steps along the way, including making sure that you have your staff there, the right staff there, making sure that your technology works, making sure that you have a particular, your clients are still there, because that's kind of what you're buying. You're not just buying the technology, although some companies just buy the technology outright and don't care about the staff. But if you're a founder and you're bootstrapped, those are the things that you need to think about in terms of increasing enterprise value and understanding, okay, this isn't my first piece of the pie. I have to maybe stick around for another 6 months to a year, 2 years, or even 5 years. How am I going to make sure I get the entire amount that they're offering? And storytelling is absolutely essential to make sure that you could get that extra bucket, because it's a sizable bucket. It's not like, it's not, okay, I'm losing 5% or 10%. It's typically more than that, So that's kind of where we come in. We've done that for a series of companies that have wanted us to tell those stories to employees, to press, as well as to the larger parent company, and they've paid us, behind the scenes to do that, so that they can make sure that they could, either make ensure that their product line is actually, vetted to and actually fulfilled to what the founder's vision is, and then make sure that they can be integrated more thoroughly into the company. So, yeah.
Shifting gears really quick, Val, because I want to take us to a recent Oxford talk that you delivered that received over 500,000 views, which is massive.
Thank you.
And the title was The Critical Role of Diversity in Corporate Success. So, two-part question here.
Yeah.
number one is why that topic specifically?
Yeah.
And number two, how does delivering those talk fits in your personal brand and in your business brand around platform?
You're asking the hard questions today, aren't you?
And you're taking the notes as a good lawyer.
I know. I'm just like, wait a second. Yeah. So the Oxford Talk is quite interesting. So I had previously done a TED Talk and loved the experience. I highly recommend everybody do a TED Talk. And the TED Talk is that ideas worth spreading, right? The Oxford Talk is about ideas worth doing. And I think over the last couple of years, what I've noticed, and this is, I have a twin sister, and she is higher up in a lot of technology companies that you probably heard of, Alteryx being one of them, and et cetera, et cetera. I like very public companies, which I won't name. But she was running into issues that I'd like to say, I want to call it something other than the glass ceiling, which is why I'm struggling a little bit, but she did run into the glass ceiling, and it was a different type of glass ceiling than traditional women, like of, we think of the glass ceiling. It was a diversity ceiling, as well as, she was an Asian woman. And it was this pattern that I saw throughout some of the clients that we actually represented, in addition to her journey, where I realized how important it was to actually talk about what companies can do to promote diversity throughout the organization. Because while people talk about, hey, I'm a diversity expert, the reality is that it's around change management, and they're not talking, like the diversity experts weren't talking about some of the change management principles that were required to shift an organization. And so I did the Oxford Talk talking about my journey as an Asian American woman, and I talk about how Asians can get a seat at the table. But the principles that I talked about during the talk were primarily change management principles, because I believe that it's not just like everybody and their dog having a group and singing kumbaya at the bottom level, right? It's about change at the top, putting together strategies, as well as having people wanting to embrace different ways of forming a company and making sure that it impacts the bottom line. That, things that we don't talk about, the soft skills, as well as having a real conversation, which isn't really done in a safe space. But like the DE&I experts that I talked to, who came from the HR background, which I found very, very common, and communications for some reason was parked at the door. And so I believe, just from the talk that I gave, in addition to some of the change management like types of initiatives that we've done for companies, that a change management lens is necessary to actually increase diversity within an organization and actually help change the dynamic at the top. So that's the reason why I did the Oxford Talk, because I thought if people could understand DE&I and through a storytelling lens, maybe I could give it. And yes, while and even I struggled with this for a little bit, as Aggie knows, talking about my heritage and some of the nuances related to that, and being in a business that actually supports highly, companies that target highly regulated markets, is a little bit of a dichotomy. But the reality is that irrespective of what industry you're in, storytelling is super important. And that was my gift, and that's the reason why I did the talk. Also, I was worried my nephew was going into, he's going to be in college, and my niece is going to college in a couple of years, and I was really worried about what was going to happen to them as they enter the workforce, and whether or not they could have a voice in corporate America.
On a side note, have you watched the commencement speech of Harrison Butker at the Benedictine College, where he made a call for all women to pretty much be homemakers, because that was what the future of the woman should be?
I saw that. Yeah. I did. Mentally threw like Rotten Tomatoes at him, but yes.
Well, that's nice, because my reaction was a little bit more mentally violent.
There is, I will have to say, there is a fear, and hopefully it's unfounded, that we are going to go back to an environment that we were in the 1960s and 70s, from a social perspective. And there are some disturbing trends, that being one of them, but others, other trends where, I don't know if your listeners know this, or if you guys know this, but there are some states that are trying to enact alien land laws, that prevent Asian citizens, as well as American citizens of Chinese descent, from owning land in certain areas. And then Florida took it a step further, and this is actually not incorrect, but they from an educational standpoint will not take graduate students from China and some other Asian countries. And what it's doing, the effect that it's doing, not just passing an alien land use law that prevents Chinese citizens from owning land with no notations on if you become a Chinese citizen, right? And then with the education component, it's actually impacting how students view Asian Americans, even if they're not from China or any other place. So like if I were there as a student coming from San Francisco, students might see me as as a foreigner and not accepted within the university. So some of the professors have actually lobbied the state and rallied against the university to get rid of this law. And the funny thing about Florida is that there are other states that are starting to model their laws similar to Florida. And they tried, and this came as a nod from Texas, ironically. But Texas, thank God, the Asian community got together and didn't put that land use law in effect. I don't know what they're going to do about the educational system, but from what I understand, there's 5 to 7 other states trying to enact an alien land use law, preventing Chinese from actually owning land. And this translates to Chinese American, in addition to education. So I'm just talking about that now because it's something that people aren't keenly aware of. But with what the Supreme Court did with women's rights, don't get me started. With what they're doing and how they're scrutinizing, some of the other types of socially acceptable things right now, it gets me a little bit miffed because people don't realize what's happening. And with affirmative action being now gone, it doesn't really help anyone. It's almost like we are going back to the 1960s and 70s, where our elders actually were able to make headway, and we're falling 20 steps behind.
Well, there is a reason why Margaret Atwood ended up writing Handmaid's Tale, and
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to be saying "Under His Eye" and "Blessed be the fruit" with every conversation I have.
That's that's not, that's not wrong actually.
Australia, here we come.
Exactly. I was actually talking to my partner, um, and I said, depending on where the election is and what happens, and I live in California, I'm like, well, we need to think about the alternatives to living in the U.S. You know, so
Well,
yeah.
you are living in California. That is an alternative to living in the U.S.
No, no, we're just more liberal than most. That's all. Yeah. But even here, people don't realize that, like Asians couldn't own land like and until the 1970s, 1968, 69, is when they got repealed the alien land use law where Chinese and Asian citizens couldn't own land, and 71, 72, 73 is when they could start buying land again, you know? But who knows? Just it's interesting because we don't, that's not that long ago, right? Not that long ago at all. So yeah.
No, I believe people born in the 70s are in their 50s, so that's baby history.
Exactly. Exactly.
Although by American standard, 50 years is antique, so apparently, it's not like in Europe.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Valerie, I am curious,
Yeah.
as a business owner yourself,
Hmm.
how has storytelling impacted your own business, the growth and perception that it's out there?
Chrissy, that's a great question. So, I wonder about that every single day. No, just joking. The reality is that we've been
Kind
fortunate.
of.
I'm kind of joking, but the reality is that I could be a better storyteller for myself, and I am a good storyteller for clients. And it's always been about client service for us. And for my story, I've had so many different points, and I've had so many different points to my career and to some of the fun projects that I've worked on, like building homes and writing a book and that sort of and talking. And so now I'm keenly focused on putting together a great narrative, especially going forward on tying all my projects, as well as making sure that platform is, keenly weaved together to tell my story. But from a platform perspective, because you asked about my personal perspective, right? From a platform perspective, we have done a pretty good job of talking about our track record and telling the story of our clients, going forward, and our skill set just kind of, um, our skill set is just inherent to what we do. So that's how people know us. That's the brand that we represent. They're like, oh, well, we know that they could do the job, so we're just going to hire them. So yeah. Hmm. And that's the importance of brand and storytelling, and storytelling are for our clients.
Going back to and still staying on that storytelling vibe, why do you think, because you're not the first one to say we're really good at providing the service to our clients,
Hmm.
but we kind of put ourselves in the back seat. It's always on that simmering on that back burner, but never on full blast on the front burner. What do you think that is?
I will tell you this. I will say that as a woman who takes care of people, I do put people's needs first versus mine. And you know, um, as a child of an Asian tiger mom, I always put my my mother's needs before mine, growing up, and so it never mattered if we were able to. And this is a, an incident I bring in my book. It didn't matter if I played the viola at a concert level, got straight A's in school, ran track and field at state, got on the dean's list and, travel all around the world playing my instrument, right? None of that mattered, even though, theoretically looking back, I'm like, oh, it's pretty good, right? I was probably a badass. Um, but it was really about, okay, did I please my mom? Was this good enough for my mom? And I think going back to, why have I put my needs on the back burner to our clients' needs? It is about, the way that we grew up and the way that we were raised, and to not focus on the things that we're doing because it's like bragging, so to speak, even if we do a good job and we can do it.
What an underachiever.
Yeah, I know.
I'm pretty sure that you're a natural Enneagram 3 because of your upbringing, which is my case too, because being the daughter of two Olympic athletes and having been given the choice of
Right.
do you want to go this route or do you want to go that route? I'm pretty sure that even though my parents never forced me to do anything, I'm still trying to prove myself to them in some ways.
Exactly. And I'm just kind of curious if this is a female trait, or is this, a product of upbringing?
I would say a little bit of both, to be
I was going to
honest.
say
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, I think it's a congruence of upbringing, culture as well, because I think the Asian and Eastern European culture is in so many ways they're intertwined in our family values and our humility and not wanting to be full exhibitionists, but we are always kind of waiting on other people to recognize us without really having to push ourselves. But
Right.
at the same time, I don't think words of affirmation are our motivational love language.
Right.
Whereas the upbringing and the nurture in a society and more individualistic society like the US is making you more prone to wanting to stand out, whereas we're like part of this giant community of people in supporting where the next door neighbor, you call them your uncle because you've grown up with them.
Exactly. I going back to, I think of my sister and I think of actually a lot of Asian women in particular, who grew up in an Asian tiger parented environment. And, the idea of, am I good enough? Even though you've, scaled a mountain and you have put together an entire plan for execution for a company that leads them to a multi-billion-dollar exit, right? Is that good enough? Is that good enough? And so the sheer fact that we ask those questions confounds me. And that's something I think that we as women need to really consider. Do we consider ourselves, do we consider ourselves good enough for ourselves? And who is a judge for that? Right? And like, it's nobody else. We're the judge of whether or not we're good enough, that we have the skills, and patting ourselves on the back for everything that we've done,
That's what business.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Valerie, this has been really enlightening. I love the different veins that we've traveled down today. And I want to make sure that anyone who is interested in this book that you've written can learn more about it. So give us a quick little synopsis of why you were interested in writing a book, and writing a book that's not in your field of work, right? Something that
Right.
allows that creative side of you to come out. And where can people find it?
Yeah, definitely. So, in true disclosure, in a life that would be an interesting life as my second career, I'd love to actually create television concepts as well as
Ooh.
movies and books and that sort of thing. But this particular book that just came out is called The Ultimate Self-Help Guide for the Child of an Asian Tiger Mom. It's under a pen name called Victoria Ha, and I wrote it with the idea that you could have a relationship with your mom without your pattern, your mother and your family governing who you are as a person. While like a lot of people write for help, what I noticed is that, especially over the years, um, and especially because I did a lot of things that my mother wanted me to do, and what my family wanted to do because of culture, right? I found that I lost myself. And so through a series of 10 to 15 years, I went through a lot of therapy, alternative therapy, energy work, everything in everything and anything I tried just to get out of the pattern so I could find out who I was. And so went on a cruise, and it was an experiment with my family to see whether or not I could get out of these patterns after all this therapy work I did. And then realized that I had to get more therapy and did more therapy work. But that's beside the point. My, but throughout the throughout the book, I kind of talk about my journey in realizing that these patterns don't have to run me, that I could have a relationship with my sister, my mom, my parents, and be authentic to who I am and what my needs are. And I give handy dandy self help tips at the very end of every single chapter, and I kind of talk about like the next steps on what you could do to heal yourself. It's also, I think, mental health month and AAPI month, right? And what a lot of Asians in particular don't do is that they don't go to see their mental health practitioner. And so I wrote in the style of, hey, this is nice, gentle bathroom reading is what I called it, where you can actually read it as a guilty pleasure, but also highlight things in the book so that you could take to your therapist and actually talk through some of the types of patterns that they might have experienced, and do some of the exercises that I did so they could find inner peace. So, and the subtitle, I'll show it to you. The subtitle is called Your Path to Finding Inner Peace.
Which from some of the passages that you share in that book, your mom definitely did not have inner peace between you and your sister, especially that one scene where she's watching her PBS show and you're in her bedroom snooping around her dresser. And it's that whole dialogue and that whole confluence of events, it is so freaking hilarious. And I love the fact that towards the end of it, you say Sabrina was so traumatized that she stayed home from school the next day because of this whole excerpt. And it's just, it's so well written, and it's like a list, and your list headers are freaking phenomenal. So kudos to that, because it is comical to read.
Thank you. That was the point. I wanted it to be a fun book, but I also wanted to talk about serious issues. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, if
Valerie,
you are a child of an Asian tiger mom, definitely read the book.
or if you have some kind of complex relationship with your parents because you feel like you have to reach some sort of, I don't know, achievement to be an equal to them, also read this book.
Exactly. It's funny, and then I'll end. But it's funny because some people say, it sounds like you had a narcissistic parent, and I'm like, we can call it all we want. At the end of the day, it's not about who that person is and what the term is. It's about how you can get out of your patterns, right? And how you can actually have a relationship. So, yeah.
Exactly.
And find peace.
That's beautiful.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you
This
so
has
much,
been
ladies. Yeah.
Thank
We've
you.
gone up and down and sideways on all kinds of topics, so hopefully, we've covered most of it, not all of it, because we
Yep.
could be sitting here for hours on end.
Definitely. Definitely. Cool. Well,
But
thank you
how
so
can
much.
people reach out to you? How can people reach out to you?
Um, you can contact me via my via LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach me, and then or my email Valerie at platform.com, PLAT the number 4 ORM.com.
Excellent. We'll link all that in the summary.
That sounds great. Thank you both.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
Valerie.
you.
Have a
Thank
good one.
you.